The news sensationalizes the dumbest things to create the idea of a division. And it's like what we focus on, it's like, well, what's the mirror that we're showing in front of people? We're like, here, check this out. You're like, well, it's a distorted mirror. It's not a very clear picture of the totality of what's going on.
During a recent trip to Los Angeles, I managed to catch up with a friend who also happens to be a tremendously successful entertainer named Reggie Watts. And whether or not you're familiar with Reggie's work, you really should go back and listen to that show. We believe it's one of our best episodes so far, and it'll give you a chance to meet the mind behind the seemingly nonsensical comedy it produces. Anyway, our conversation took place on the afternoon of Saturday, August 12th. Earlier that day in Charlottesville, Virginia, a white supremacist drove his car headlong into a crowd of people protesting the so-called Unite the Right rally, killing 32-year-old Heather Heyer and injuring many others. To me, it was a shot across the bow of our country as we know it, if not human decency itself. The entire thing was hanging in the national atmosphere, and so I asked Reggie about his thoughts.
The way we deal with it is really important. It's weird. I grew up, I'm half white, half black, so I kind of think of myself as like, I'm both, but I'm perceived as black. So it's, I guess that's the perception. And I grew up with a fear of the Ku Klux Klan and a fear of white supremacy. And, I had friends that even did a research paper at Hayden Lake in Idaho, with white supremacists and things like that. And so I would hear all these tales from them doing research, integrating into the camp and then coming back for their dissertation or whatever. I would hear all these things, and it causes a lot of fear. That's what it's about. It's fear. It comes from fear, and it causes fear, and then it energizes the people that are reacting from fear or whatever. It's a feedback loop. When I see these types of things, my initial instinct is there's got to be a way for those people to know that they're accepted in some way. I mean, not the hatred that they're saying, not the damage that they're creating, but really all it is there's an absence, there's a split, there's a divide where people feel as though something's been being taken away from them. And it's because there's a disconnection to the community. So because if you interviewed every one of those white supremacists, they would have different philosophical reasons as to why they've decided to have this viewpoint. And people attacking immediately is not necessarily, I understand it, I get it, but that's not my first instinct. My first instinct is to try to reach out and understand.
I want to do a song. This is a song about heritage and people and the amalgamation of people's minds as they come collectively together as a population to affect one another in a way that kind of networks their consciousnesses in a way that can be accessed by those people who view themselves as observers of systems and a hierarchy, which enables them to then thereby surmise certain outcomes that gives information to other people who classify themselves as observers, who can then zoom in and zoom out to different levels to kind of analyze and create different situational awarenesses. So, you know what? One of those.
Reaching out is really tough. It's a tough thing because it's such a hair trigger, man. It's like someone calls you the N-word or whatever minority you happen to be, or even if you're a white person who's disgusted by these people, what they want, what that movement wants, is the violence. It wants the violence. So you can't give that to them. I mean, it's like it sounds like kind of like a little bit hippie-ish, but I really do believe that they're just hurting inside and they're disconnected and they want to be respected. And the idea of like being supreme because of this and because of that is just kind of a smokescreen. It's just a mechanism by which to vent their frustration.
Just something upon your person, yeah.
I don't have a problem. I almost like this sounds weird, but I almost don't have a problem if someone's like believes that they're superior because they're of a different race, as long as they're not violent about it, and as long as they're willing to have a conversation about it. I can stay pretty reasonable. I can talk to someone and go like, why do you feel this way? That's different than what they would expect, because they want a race war. You know, they want the violence, because the more violence, then it's like, well, see what I mean? Look at these savages, you know, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's a hard. I get it. It's really tough. But it's really about everything in our culture is about division. I mean, because that's how you make money. The money is made from divisiveness.
Whoa, come on, yeah, y'all know what I'm saying?
The other thing too about all of this is that it's what we choose to consume and what we choose to focus on. You know, It's important to focus. I mean, if there's what's happening right now is really sad, and it's disappointing as a human being seeing other human beings being this way. But what we choose to focus on, it's like, you know, it's impossible to get away from. I mean, essentially all the negative shit that's happening that you read about in the news or that you see on TV in any of the outlets is, you know, I'm just using an arbitrary number, but it's like probably about 5% of the totality of what's going on.
Right.
Because there's at least 80 to 90% of good things that are occurring. But that doesn't create, that's the tip of the spear is fear. You know, like
right.
the tip of the spear is confusion, chaos. This is the worst thing ever. This hasn't happened before. It's unprecedented. This is off the charts. Blah, 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 blah. Look at all this violence. It's like 2 people get beat up. It looks really terrible. No one should ever get beat up, but 2 people get beat up. Meanwhile, 6,000 people sang a song together at a concert just like 10 miles away.
But as a race of androids, we know better than to simply call ourselves what it is that we read about in textbooks, what we hear about on the heary things that we hear things from, or the small children that run about willy-nilly, wielding various weapons and threatening us every day in the streets here in Boston.
And it's like what we focus on. It's like, well, what's the mirror that we're showing in front of people? We're like, here, check this out. You're like, well, it's a distorted mirror. It's not a very clear picture of the totality of what's going on in human culture. Instead, it's just completely curated and designed to create inflammation and disease, essentially. And it sucks. It really sucks, because I guarantee you I could probably be amongst some white supremacist guys that were at least fairly reasonable. And I bet you if we were in a neutral conversational setting and it felt open enough, we could probably arrive at a lot of commonalities.
I feel as though there's a tranquil sunset setting in over my mind, which indicates that the world is going to be a pretty cool place at some point, and then it's going to be horrible again. But then it's going to be really cool, and then it's going to be not so good, and then it'll be pretty decent for a while, and then it's going to be like, uh-oh.
Because I could understand where they're coming from and why they feel the way they feel, and they could probably understand where I'm coming from and the way that I feel. And they could still even say, you know what, we're still white supremacists. Like, okay, great. It's almost like, you know, that Bugs Bunny or the Warner Brothers cartoon where the sheep or the sheepdog would punch in, and the coyote or the wolf or whatever would check. They'd be like, hey Ralph, hey Fred, whatever. And it's like, okay, now we're at work. Okay, so now we're enemies. You know,
Right.
It could almost be like that. It's like, no, you're like, it's like, well, I'll play the role. I'll be the white supremacist guy. Okay, cool. I'll be the racial activist guy. Okay, cool. All right, great. Oh yeah, that's it. All right. Okay, hey, you shouldn't come in here. What? I have every right to be in here. You got to get out of here. Fine. But I'm coming back, or whatever. And then, like, later on, they're just like, hey, that was pretty good. Yeah, it's really convincing. You know? like, you know, like, sometimes I just imagine the world like that. Like, we're all just kind of, like, playing these characters. Like, okay, now I'm the asshole in traffic. I'm the guy that cut you off. Now, you're supposed to yell at me. Remember that? You're supposed to yell at me, but also endanger the lives of other people because you want to make a point? That's your role.
Now you know you're going to have to do a bit on this.
Yeah, I know. It's my favorite. I love it. Awareness. It's the cure for everything.
The Well is produced, recorded, and edited by Brandon Edgens and myself, Anson Mount. Theme music by Jonathan Myberg. Additional music and comedy by Reggie Watts. Thanks for this episode of The Well go out to PopTech for making their media available under a Creative Commons Attribution license. Links to those clips can be found at our website, thewellpod.com. That's thewellpod.com. And of course, a very special thank you to Reggie Watts for going out of his way to sit down with us in Hollywood during a time when he's very busy doing all of his Hollywood things and acting all Hollywood while he does it. Just kidding, Reggie. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great week.